paradise corrupt. Ursulia, named after a famously beautiful Eldar maiden of myth, was a small but verdant world, famous in Eldar society for its majestic thornwoods and towering arbor cities. It had been fashioned as a true paradise by the Aeldari, but it had now been twisted beyond recognition. To descend through the silver cloud banks of Ursulia's skies was to feel a great sadness of the soul. Roiling warp storms had lashed its surface in the last few Terran months, appearing from nowhere like a seismic eruption upon an unseen fault line. Ursulia's glorious waterfalls had been turned to swathes of crimson glass, and its rolling dales reduced to skull-strewn wastelands. Amongst the planet's valleys was a moss-strewn henge known as the Obsidian Gate. This former Webway route was permanently closed many thousands of standard years ago as a precautionary measure against invasion, for it led straight to Biel-Tan. The decision to seal it had since been vindicated a dozen times over, for gentle Ursulia had known many wars over the millennia. Yet it was theoretically possible that the route could be reopened by arcane force. It was a possibility the Biel-Tani would do anything to avoid. For the warriors of Biel-Tan, to make planetfall upon Ursulia was much like looking upon the face of a once beautiful dilettante badly burned by some horrific twist of fate. The craft-worlders did not take the loss well. Expressions had hardened to stony scowls under the hoods of those rangers searching the twisted forests for exodite survivors. They had found only death. In the space of time it had taken for Biel-Tan's outriders to arrive at Ursulia, the planet had already suffered beyond comprehension. Under detailed instructions from Autarch Millennial, the warriors of the Swordwind were en route to aerial ambush points in their falcon and wave serpent skimmers. Underneath their helms, the faces of the aspect warriors remained cold and impassive. They had donned their war masks before leaving the craft world, embodying the aspects of the war god kind's inhumanely focused killers. Only once the battle was over would they assume their fully emotive personas once more, allowing themselves to grieve. Rain hammered down as the Swordwind's transports shot through the skies. The convoy of vehicles was all but invisible in their cloud strike formation. This was common practice amongst the Biel-Tani, for they believe the blade unseen strikes truest of all. The convoy of vehicles was all but invisible in their cloud strike formation. This was common practice amongst the Biel-Tani, for they believe the blade unseen strikes truest of all. Around the grav tanks, a tempest was brewing, the disturbing keening of the wind hinting at some unnatural energy beneath it. The tang of ozone hung heavy in the air, a sense of doom gathering like the closeness before a thunderstorm. The Swordwind of Biel-Tan had sent 1,000 fighters to Ursulia, yet in the heart of every Eldar warrior, there was a sense that they had already lost. They had watched over this hidden world for millennia, and in doing so had repelled orc invasions, HRUD infestations, imperial conquests, and dark Eldar raids. Against the raw power and sudden onset of a chaos tempest, however, there was little they could do. Warp Storm Balamay had aired into baleful existence so swiftly that even the Eldar could not counter it. What was intended as a mission of rescue had become one of vengeance, and of preventing the same fate befalling Biel-Tan, should the unthinkable happen. The Mask of Slaanesh was poised to achieve just that. Though it had cost her much to attain it, she had masterminded a full-scale demonic invasion of Ursulia. Her intent was not to conquer the planet but to use it as a staging post. Should she muster force enough to break through the Obsidian Gate, she would reach Biel-Tan before eve reigned, not only claiming a rich bounty of Eldar souls but also capturing or devouring the single greatest threat to Slaanesh's continued existence. The Demon Herald had taken great pains to arrange the conquest to come, and ensure that it had a semblance of focus, no mean feat, considering the rival forces involved. The Mask had marshaled not only her own great promenade of excess, a gathering of demonettes, seekers, seeker charioteers, and half-mortal hellairs, but also seduced a battalion of cornate demons into fighting for the same cause. The rivalries between the Chaos Gods had raged across reality and the warp for time immemorial. Though the brothers in darkness were each locked in the Great Game, and though they sought the same destructive ends more often than not, they were such bitter rivals that they held an open contempt for each other. This ire often boiled over into outright war. Slaanesh, the master of excess, was considered a self-indulgent, preening impostor by the blood god Khorne. Conversely, Slaanesh saw the blood god as an unimaginative boar with all the grace of a starving hound. Their demon minions harbored much the same attitudes, for in essence, a demon is but a fragment of its chaos god patron's psyche made manifest. The mask of Slaanesh was nothing if not persuasive, however, and her repertoire went far beyond the pleasures of the Esh. She knew well how to exploit the compulsions of others, for she was an obsession given form. The strongest souls were often the easiest to fool. Hubris and overconfidence was the downfall of champions and wise men alike. The demon lords of Khorne were prideful indeed. It was the tour that the mask sought to play upon, thereby binding them to her cause. With the powers of chaos ascendant in the galaxy and warp tempests raging across the breadth of mankind's realm, demons found moving from the Empyrean to the warp storm-racked domains of real space easier than ever, especially for one as adroit as the mask. Still, there was no way she had the strength to break open the psychic runes of warding that sealed the portal to Biel-Tan. She knew of but one demon strong enough to break the arcane defenses, Skarbrand the Exiled One, the most terrible bloodthirster of them all. Even then his power might not suffice. Skarbrand was a demon whose arrogance was so immense that he sought to slay his own parent deity in single combat. He was hurled across reality as a result, broken in body and mind. All that was left of Skarbrand was rage, raw and all-consuming. Seeing in the infamous demon an instrument of pure brute force, the mask had sought the bloodthirster out, dancing her way through the realm of chaos to speak to him face to disfigured face. At first, Skarbrand sought to cut the mask to pieces with his twin axes, slaughter and carnage. However, the demon swayed and dodged from the bloodthirster's blows with such sublime passivity that Skarbrand stopped viewing her as a martial opponent and instead saw her as more of an inconvenience, just as a rampaging stallion might see a gadwai upon its ank. When he had all but lost interest, the mask told her foe of her own exile, for she had been banished by her god just as Skarbrand had been banished by his. This won the raging demon's ear for a time. She spoke to him of a great wager, a contest between the demon hosts of Slaanesh and those of Khorne. The competition would be held upon the maiden world of Ursulia. Whosoever claimed the most Eldar lives in the name of their patron before nightfall would be proved the most powerful in the service of their respective gods. The demon herald's words were expertly delivered. Her beguilements were clever enough to stoke Skarbrand's eternal rage, but not to trigger a killing spree, not yet, at least. The greater demon spat, snarled and roared with contempt, for the disciples of Khorne do not idly ignore a challenge to the strength. With her greater plans set in motion, the mask smiled from ear to ear, waltzing away to amass her followers even as the mighty bloodthirster stomped off on his own warpath. Within a Terran week of that incongruous pact, the demon hosts of the mask and Skarbrand trod the peaty loam of Ursulia's twisted forests. Their warp-born followers numbered in the hundreds of thousands, for word of the wager had brought a great many demonic champions together, each determined to outclass the gods' rivals with impressive acts of slaughter. As the demons burst from within the eye of Ursulia's fiercest psychic storm, the invasion had begun in earnest. The Exodites defending their world had used every weapon, trick and trap at their disposal, unleashing hordes of roaring megasaurs and mounting mass cavalry charges that saw whole households of dragon knights charge into echelons of demonic foot soldiers. Theirs was a noble act of defiance, but ultimately it was doomed. The invading demonic host outnumbered them twice over, and with the mask and Skarbrand at the fore, the Exodite defenders were overwhelmed in a matter of Terran days. When the sword wind of Biel-Tan arrived, the Exodites had been all but eradicated. Demons already cavorted and guzzled hot blood amongst the twisted ruins, many counting the dead or arguing amongst themselves as to which of their number was the deadliest. The mask was still on the hunt, coordinating her plans with the choreographer's artistry. Her seeker parties had located the Obsidian Gate on a ridge overlooking the greenish valley not a moment too soon. She knew the Eldar well and suspected that not only would the Exodites' craft-world cousins attack soon, but that in their haste to defend the portal, they would give her the chance she needed to break through it. It has long been said by the gossips of the Slaaneshi courts that Skarbrand's bitterness and frustration at his fall from grace lent him strength. When the Biel-Tani sought to bring him down, his mounting anger, bolstered by the eldritch power of the warp storm that still lashed Ursulia, should give him might enough to break through any barrier. This evil contest of demons was about to escalate massively, for the slaughter was by no means at an end. By the time the storm abated, the death toll on both sides would have reached truly shocking heights. "Why did you not foresee this, sister?" hissed Millennial, jabbing a slender finger at the ghostly apparition in his wave serpent. "Did the runes not show it?" "They show a great many futures," replied the Seat Lathriel, over the psychic link. "Sometimes the futures change so fast even we Farseers cannot read them all. I know your fallibility well. In our youth, it never carried quite so high a cost. None of us saw this, brother. A psychic event of galactic magnitude has taken place. It bears down on us even now. The skein of fate is unraveling and reknitting so fast that none of us can predict it, not even the High Farseer of Ulthway. You speak of the Whispering God, sister, as do our uninvited guests. Salvation perhaps, but it comes too late. Too late for the people of Ursulia, and too late for us. Though it withers my heart to admit it, yes. Biel-Tan may yet pay in blood too." The wave serpent shot over a vast jade lake. On the far-gazing hologram at the front of the passenger bay, Millennial saw that the edges of the lake were tinged with red. "Now," he said, his voice distant, "we will punish those who dare to risk our wrath." The autarch stone was as clipped as an exarch's battle stanzas. "The time is here. Engines of Vault to the northwest of the portal, 8 leagues close. Windriders mirror northeast. Falcons form the tip of the pyramid. Aspect warriors form the coils of the serpent. An act. We must turn chaos upon itself," Millennial, said Lathriel. "We cannot win this alone." Demon storm. Howling, crying, and screaming they came, blades gripped tight and snarling smiles displaying pointed teeth. The demon hordes of Slaanesh and Khorne scoured the twisted forests of Ursulia for more heads to claim. A cruel frenzy was upon them, the jibes and imprecations cast aside in their desperate need to prove the supremacy. With the psychic tempest raging all around, the demons paid little heed to the craft-world forces descending through the clouds. Only the mask watched the heavens from the corner of her coal-black eyes. She knew full well that Biel-Tan could not help but take the bait she had laid so carefully before them. They would attack with pitiless fury, as they always did, and in doing so, would not drive off the foes, but trigger a devastating counterattack. Slaanesh revels in every kind of excess, especially that which involves the spilling of vital uids. Khorne, for his part, is empowered just as much by the slaughter of his own armies as he is those of his enemies. The same could be said of his minions. Blood was blood, no matter its provenance. The Eldar attack was sudden and devastatingly effective. At a single word from the autarch Millennial, the sword wind dived from the skies, pulse lasers and plasma weapons occurring in such profusion it seemed a hail of killing light slanted down from the heavens alongside the squalls of ectoplasmic liquid. At a single word from the autarch Millennial, the sword wind dived from the skies, pulse lasers and plasma weapons occurring in such profusion it seemed a hail of killing light slanted down from the heavens alongside the squalls of ectoplasmic liquid. Explosions blossomed through the canopies of the forest, blasting grotesque anatomies high into the air. Each fusillade was aimed not at the larger throngs of warp creatures darting through the twisted foliage, but the largest and most elaborately ornamented of their number. The Swordwind had long practiced the strategy of assassination as a way to even the odds for the small but elite forces. Despite the ethereal nature of the demon hosts, the same strategy worked on the immortal legions of the great enemy. Within Terran seconds, the Eldar had slain dozens of the heralds that had given a semblance of leadership to the demon hordes. It was then that the Eldar launched a multifaceted assault, devised by Autarch Millennial in the space of a few intense minutes once he had ascertained the disposition of the demonic hordes. Marshalling his troops into several warhosts, his layered attack saw the cloud-born Eldar encircle the demon warbands closest to the Obsidian Gate. First to press home the assault were the Adruthan Fuelku, the flight of falcons. Tight squadrons of grav tanks veered through the splashing rain to engage the soul grinders, smashing aside corrupted foliage in their haste to close with their attackers. The demon engines spat a hideous amount of firepower into the skies, their harvester cannons sending dirty chain explosions into the oncoming warhost's path, but the fire was largely ineffective. The sheer speed of the surprise attack had robbed the fire of any real accuracy. At the fore of the airborne assault came the Crimson Death. Two squadrons of Nightshade interceptors shone like wedges of polished ruby in the sky, weaving to and fro with the grace of raptors on the hunt. One of the elegant aircraft was torn from the sky by a lucky shot, its wreckage spiraling knives of psychoplastic that stabbed into the jungle below. The others evaded the fusillades with barrel rolls and steep dives. At the last moment, the Scarlet craft crisscrossed one another in a series of interlocking attack runs, the bright lances stabbing pinpoint death into the ranks of the enraged soul grinders. The attack was intended to blind the giant demon engines, just as Kyne's hurled blades took the eyes from the white worm Anothea in the cycles of Eldar myth. In practice, their laser beams were so vicious they took the heads from most of the iron-skinned monstrosities they struck. The clanking, piston-legged advance of the war engines slowly came to a halt as the demonic anemas were violently unbound from their ash metal bodies and ripped away into the eldritch storm. The Crimson Death was already gone, the clouds spiraling in their wake. Seeing their anti-air firepower snatched away, the demons of the greater host gave a roar of frustration so loud it caused the foliage all about to shake and shiver. The bellows and shrieks were answered by the sizzling hisses of laser beams from the grav tanks that descended by the dozen in the Crimson Death's wake. With their holofields blending them into the cloud banks behind and a canopy of weird organic foliage covering much of the sky, Millennial's cloud strike squadrons were all but invisible. Only when the killing began did the demons realize the doom that was upon them. Fire prisms sent lancing beams of killing energy into demonic riders that were crashing through the forest atop brass-bound juggernauts. The laser shots, concentrated by exotic crystal focusing arrays, blasted great craters in the enemy host, their edges steaming with boiling demonic remains. The brazen corpse stuff left over from each strike bubbled away into little more than the stench of brimstone and hot brass. Roaring down from the skies came Skarbrand himself, plummeting from the warp into reality in a trailing ball of am. The carnage had drawn him as surely as a sky shark is drawn to magic in the air. With a thunderous boom he smashed through a squadron of grav tanks, sending their mangled hulls spinning, and landed hard in the valley. Elder trees were blasted to splinters at the impact, and scarlet fires burned in his wake. Skarbrand stormed out of his impact crater, axes swinging to Lelo, the lesser demons scrambling out of the way. The giant demon made a choice target for the gunners of the Eldar grav tanks. Many a blinding beam lanced into Skarbrand, but they just made him all the angrier. As the grav tanks hit from above, the Windrider jet bikes of the Biel-Tan host were riding into the wide mouth of the greenish valley. taking aim at the greater host, they leveled such a fierce hurricane of razor-edged shuriken that they sliced down plant and demon both. The war for Ursulia was raging once more. The tempest of blades. The Windrider host, well used to striking their enemies at speed, made ready to peel off and attack further down the line. Against a mortal enemy, they would no doubt have proven swift enough. The demons of Slaanesh, however, were no normal foes. Out from the massed ranks of Demet started a rock of seekers, long-limbed, bipedal steeds of Slaanesh with bejeweled Demet riders atop them. Shrilling and hooting, the beasts ran at impossible speed alongside the racing jet bikes before they could pull away, lashing them with long, ropey tongues and pulling the Eldar from the saddles. Close behind were seeker chariots festooned with spinning, scything blades. Those Windriders still lying dazed on the forest or were unceremoniously slashed to ribbons, their violated body parts strewn across the loam. Monitoring the counterattack from the passenger bay of his gravcraft, Autarch Millennial ordered his elite troops into the fray. The war host known as the Coiled Serpent, translated in the Eldar tongue as Thielanake Usaim, drove forward into the enemy ank. Its massed wave serpents disgorged hundreds of aspect warriors. Every color and shape of the godkind's war aspect was suddenly on the attack, their armor vibrant and strong amongst the sickly hues of Ursulia's corrupted forests. First came the swooping hawks, darting from blue-gray clouds so similar in hue to their armor the winged warriors seemed no more than knickers at the limit of vision. For their thigh holsters they dispensed small but powerful grenades, falling like acorns from a gale-tossed oak. They landed within the mass of cornate demons at the edge of the cliff. Where they struck home, spheres of crackling white plasma appeared, each string of explosions hurling mutilated, red-skinned bodies into one another before they discorporated entirely. Last blast of fire stabbed down to reap the tally anew. By the time the cornate demon cannons had ground their way up a nearby ridge to retaliate, the swooping hawks were gone. In the place came warp spiders, materializing behind the cannon batteries without a sound. They fired tangles of monofilament wire so sharp they cut through demonish and hell-forged brass alike. Then, in a crackle of unlight, the warp spiders too were gone. Down in the valley, the Slaaneshi counterattack was fierce. A crowd of lithe demets charged the aspect warrior host, hissing with glee at the prospect of a rich banquet of souls. The first wave pressed towards the rematerialized warp spiders that had taken such a toll on the cornate demons on the ridge, the Slaaneshi host screaming loudly to draw the focus of their enemies. The aspect warriors opened fire once more, a fusillade of monofilament wire engulfing the fiends to carve them to disturbingly bloodless chunks. But the distraction had played its part. A second warband of she-demons, having slunk close and climbed into a copse of spike trees, dropped shrieking on the warp spiders from above. Several of the fearless Eldar were ripped apart, the severed limbs cast with abandon into the air. The rest simply vanished, triggering their warp jump generators to reappear with a raker of light some 100 Terran feet distant. The celebrating demets were left confused and wrong-footed. They hissed blame at one another as they cast about for more victims, only to be greeted by a devastating fusillade from the Dark Reapers stationed within the walkway of an arboreal palace. Reaper missiles detonated in the demons' midst, a chain of explosions so fierce it blew apart the iron-hard fungi of the valley even as it tore through dozens of the demonets taking shelter amongst them. The thumping boom had barely faded from the valley walls before another Slaaneshi attack raced in, a wave of demonic cavalry with demon chariots racing close behind. Another squadron of wave serpents closed in as Millennial reacted to this new assault by directing the mounted counterattack known as Fejain Saim Zarakine. Whilst the demon cavalry sprinted on, a shrine of dire avenges disembarked with smooth swiftness to unleash a storm of shuriken at the seekers racing past. Monomolecular discs slashed out by the thousand, even as the enemy cavaliers rode the lithe steeds of Slaanesh close. Not even the preternaturally nimble demons of the Dark Prince of Chaos could avoid a salvo delivered with such expertise. The demons were sliced to ribbons much as the charioteer sisters had cut apart the Windrider guardians mere moments before issuing from the bodies. Whilst the dire avengers were reloading, those seekers that made it through the hurricane of firepower darted in to lash and slice, laying high-crested warriors low. The Shrine's Exarch stepped in to duel the riders at close quarters, taking the snake-fast blows of their opponents with shimmering force shields before ending the threat with thrusts of the swords and power spears. The chariots in the Seeker's wake burst through the ectoplasmic mist that was all that remained of their vanguard, blades wickering and riders hunkered down so as to avoid another shuriken assault. A trio of wave serpents glided smoothly from a natural boulevard, spinning to reveal their hull doors. The fire dragons inside stepped out and formed a line, forcing their zen-like focus into lethal accuracy as the demon machines careened in close. Their exarch spoke a single word. A moment later, chariots and riders were vaporized in hissing streams of aqua, molten metal spattering and hissing from the bright orange plates of the fire dragons. One lone Slaaneshi demon made it past the newly formed battle line to engage the Dark Reapers in the arbor behind, leaping from the burning remains of her chariot to swing from a low bow and vault into the midst of the heavy weapon team. With the cumbersome missile launches and reinforced armor, the Dark Reapers were easy prey for the slashing, spinning Eldars. Claws darting, she claimed the lives of 4 aspect warriors before a heavy kick sent her tumbling into the fires below. At the Obsidian Gate on the shoulders of the valley, the demons of Khorne had run down and decapitated every Eldar ranger sent to keep them from the greater fight. First 1, then 3, then 8 blood-letter warbands charged down the forested slope towards the battle. It was an eventuality Autarch Millennial had foreseen, and his warriors fell back with UID grace at the transports waiting nearby. Watching from the valley's edge, the mask hissed in frustration. She shrieked to hunt and retrieve order to her chariots. For her plan to work, the Eldar had to contest the henge itself. Nearby, Skarbrand was hacking his way through a warband of demets in a ball of and white-hot anger. He loped past the Obsidian Gate to look with longing at the explosive carnage in the valley. The mask had lured him there by insisting that the fighting would be fiercest outside the portal, and the brute had taken the bait. Now that ploy might come to naught, for the Eldar were falling back. Something had to be done, or the bloodthirster was likely to dive into the fight half a Terran mile from the location where the mask needed him most. In less than a solar minute, the mask's chosen charioteers had returned, the mangled bodies of 3 fallen warlocks laid across the yokes. The vehicle slewed to a halt as the mask leapt nimbly atop the mossy capstone of the Obsidian Gate, and the riders tossed the psychers' corpses up to their mistress as if they were little more than straw-stuffed effigies. The mask gave a piercing cry of delight, plucking the glowing spirit stones from the breastplate of each psycher's armor and sliding them down her throat one after another as a greedy human gourmet might guzzle a dish of oysters. The herald's grandstanding did not go unnoticed. 3 squadrons of speeding grav tanks changed direction, spearing in with their guns spitting death. The mask danced and dodged, cackling with glee as the skimmers came in low. Skarbrand leapt high, his axes arcing in a tremendous overhead blow. They smashed into the first grav tank so hard it came apart in a double fireball of burning wreckage that smashed into the cliff beyond. Aspect warriors tumbled out, stunned and broken, to land on the alien foliage below. The demons of Slaanesh and Khorne alike fell upon them, thrashing and slicing, desperate to claim their heads. Nearby, jetbike-riding shining spears charged in, opened fire and withdrew, expertly drawing the demons away with bait and switch maneuvers. Autarch Millennial had watched the violation of his kin's spirits upon the Obsidian Gate with utmost horror. With the thunder of Cain's fury in his blood, he issued another series of curt orders to his ex-archers. His wise and careful plan to draw the demons into his guns piecemeal was all but abandoned. Now his strategy became one of all-out assault. In his haste to make the Demet Herald pay for her heinous acts, the Autarch ordered his own squadron to close upon the Obsidian Gate. The leaders of the enemy armies had gathered there, not only the Slaneshi demon, but a heavily scarred bloodthirster that glowed with ruddy light every time the storm-screaming winds billowed past it. With enough concentration of force, Millennial reasoned, the sword wind could deal a death blow to the enemy's cohesion and take revenge for those souls torn away from the salvation of the Infinity Circuit. The demon hordes would be far easier to stymie without direction, and perhaps even turn upon themselves, as his sister Lathriel had intimated they would. The Autarch commanded his Sunstorm squadrons to combine their fire, highlighting Skarbrand as the target whilst designating the Mask as the priority kill for his remaining outcast snipers. Ranger fire spat from the high hills in response, each needle-thin burst of laser fire met with puffs of ichor from the dancing Demet Sesh. Glutted with Eldar soul stuff after her dark feast, however, the Mask was proving resilient. The fire prisms coming around for another attack run along the valley glowed bright, the complex laser cannons of the rear grav tanks channeling their fire into the giant crystals of the skimmers at the fore. Beams of coherent directed energy blasted out. Each was so thick it could have punched through a Craftworld's Wraithbone superstructure, yet they were delivered with pinpoint precision. 3, 4, 5 of the macro beams burned into Skarbrand. Their energy is so bright they hurt to behold even from several Terran leagues distant. The bloodthirster paused in his slaughter of the nearby aspect warriors, gritting his fang-like teeth as more and more energy poured into him. Glowing like a red sun, Skarbrand roared. His skin sizzled away as light poured out from his ash. Every nearby demon save the Mask had been burned away by the terrible firestorm. Bloodletters and Demets alike blasted into nothingness. Skarbrand staggered away, but the pitiless laser barrage followed his every step. The greater demon's rage grew incandescent, stoked to the heights of apoplexy by the unwelcome thought that he might be slain so early on in the bloodshed, with a meager skull tally of less than 100 to his name. Incensed, he cast his monstrous gaze around for something to kill. All he could see was the Mask, laughing cruelly at him from atop the lintel of the Obsidian Gate. Skarbrand lashed out with all his strength, the demon axe's slaughter and carnage arcing towards the Mask. At the last moment, she leaped in a backward somersault, evading the blow. The axes smashed through the lintel of the Obsidian Gate with force enough to shatter it, runes and all, to red-hot cinders. In an instant, the long-sealed Webway portal was ripped wide, a swirling tunnel of amber light stretching impossibly into the cliff face. Into the portal dived the Mask, her Demet hosts pouring through the gate behind her in a river of milk-white ash. Autarch Millennial felt the panic rise in his throat. His impassioned insistence that the demons would not breach that ancient Webway gate now seemed the folly of a proud youth. Even as he watched, the demon infection of chaos bled into the Webway, no doubt already making speed for the very heart of Biel-Tan. He felt the mind's eye of his sister Lathriel play across his thoughts. Seizing the opportunity, he sent a pulse of alarm through the ether towards her. Biel-Tan was in dire peril. Its protectors must be readied, for within a matter of Terran hours, the craft world would be invaded by its worst nemesis. Though the Mask had accomplished her goal, the battle for Ursulia raged on. The aspect warriors, under orders from their Autarch, concentrated their efforts on the Obsidian Gate. The roses they had used to draw the demons away from that critical location were now abandoned. And now all they could do was limit the number of demons that broke through into the Webway beyond. Again and again, they launched their assaults upon Skarbrand, but the monstrous bloodthirster only grew more invigorated as the fires of his anger were stoked ever higher. He ripped through battle lines of dire avengers, burned through shimmering webs of monofilament coil, and smashed grav tanks left and right whenever they passed within reach of his cruel axes. Before long, though, it was not the Eldar that Skarbrand sought to slay, but the demons of Slaanesh. He now realized that he had been tricked into acting as the mask's pawn, and that she had no intention of comparing kill tallies at the end of the day's slaughter. He plunged through the Obsidian Gate into the Webway beyond, intent on revenge. The sheer unbridled mayhem that Skarbrand left in his wake drew hundreds, then thousands of demons towards the circle of standing stones. A horde of bloodletters and blood crushes charged up towards the Webway portal from the ground below, a trio of greater demons storming in their midst. The steep slope gave no pause to creatures that had no notion of tiredness or exhaustion, and even though opportunistic attacks from Windriders, aspect warriors and grav tanks held demons back down the cliff by the dozen, the Eldar were soon outnumbered 5-1. With a heavy heart, Autarch Millennial realized the battle could not be won without blunting the sword wind for Terran decades to come. The Obsidian Gate was still in the hands of their enemies, and more Slaaneshi demons were using the cover of the fresh cornate assault as a chance to slip into the Webway unhindered. Such a tremendous influx of demons could not be allowed to pass through the Obsidian Gate, or the mask's incursion would turn from a few hundred demons to a mass invasion. There was only one course of action left. With a curt order, the Autarch commanded his Sunstorm squadrons to concentrate the fire upon the Obsidian Gate itself. With its protective runes shattered by Skarbrand's mighty blow, it was vulnerable to conventional attack. One after another the macro beams shot out. Demons died by the score as the backwash of tremendous energies rushed outwards, the psycho-reactive runes that had previously sealed the portal aglow once more as the stone burned from within. Then, with a titanic boom, the Obsidian Gate exploded. The Eldar were already withdrawing, running hard to the grav tanks and escaping away into the skies. Millennial had ordered an immediate retreat, though the sword wind valued the Exodite maiden worlds highly. The craft world itself was in dire peril. Biel-Tan was running out of time.